you to today's session and to the amazing people who you're going to be hearing from today. This session is going to really dig into the creative processes of the next generation of innovators. And what that really means is to take a look behind how they took their great ideas and turned them into reality. This for anybody who has started a business, who's started a new project, who's launched an event, or who's even tried to take a story in their personal life and turn it from a story into reality. These are big challenges, and one of the great mysteries is how things go from ideas to actual realities. And so I'm really excited to introduce you today to this session where we're going to hear all about how a variety of really talented people did that. We are sponsored today by Connection, by United Healthcare and Tufts Health Freedom, and Bank Prov. And we thank them all. They are all also amazingly successful companies that grew out of somebody's idea somewhere. And so a perfect fit for today's session. So with that, I am going to step aside and introduce you to Jeff Feingold, the editor of New Hampshire Business Review, who will bring you into the next part of the session. Jeff, welcome and good morning.
Sorry for that delay. Thank you, Ernesto. First of all, welcome everybody to NextGen New Hampshire. It's going to be a really, I think, an exciting event because I think this is something that people have been looking for a while now, in the many months of the pandemic, looking for inspiration. I think many people have found it, but I also think, as Ernesto said, turning that inspiration to ideas into reality really makes the difference between a successful entrepreneur and others that, aren't as successful. And I think I think finding out how these four people who are perfect examples of how they've turned their inspiration into reality, getting ideas, getting some inspiration yourself about it is going to be very helpful going forward. Anyway, that's enough of me. And I would like to say that our moderator today is going to be Lisa Ryler, our associate editor. And I just want to say that Lisa, ever since she started with us at the Business Review, Lisa has really specialized in writing about companies that innovate, that have really shown the way, blazed a trail in many technologies and many industries. And she's really, I think, really very much up to speed on this kind of stuff. And I don't think anyone would be more qualified than her to be our moderator today. So Lisa, welcome, and I'm really looking forward to this event.
Thank you, Jeff. There's always that little bit of delay. I think everyone can understand that. Welcome again to this morning's event. We have a great lineup of speakers today. I think that no matter what type of business you're in, you can benefit from learning about the not only being inspired, but the processes that these people went through to, make their dreams and their ideas a reality. To get started, I would like to introduce you to Joel Kunko, who is co-founder and CEO of Ecotext. Now, Joel actually is a UNH alum. He co-founded Ecotext while attending UNH, seeing the direct consequence of everyday student experiences. I'm sure many of us, whether through ourselves or your children, have learned, of course, the expensive costs of buying textbooks for college. So Joel founded Ecotext, which is a collaborative learning platform with access to over 75,000 high-quality resources and the ability to capture notes, share insights, and create citations right in the margins. So with that, I will have Joel tell you a little bit more about his company and how he came up with that idea and how he's made it a reality.
Awesome. Appreciate that introduction, Elisa. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And let me know when you guys are able to see so. Awesome. So really excited to spend the next couple of minutes with you guys kind of highlighting ecotechs and the process and the steps that came to be, for the solution that we're building out to really disrupt education and to really allow students and educators to be more effective in today's evolving educational world. So to kind of go back a couple of years, as mentioned, I was studying at the University of New Hampshire, pursuing my undergrad in electrical engineering. And, every semester you get that feeling, that new semester feeling. And I would basically walk into my classrooms like this, right? Really defiant, really energetic. It's a new slate. Let's try to get a 4.0 with really high goals. And I was just ready to take on the semester and to take on the course. But after getting that syllabus and, most times reading at the bottom of the page, required textbooks, and then searching for that same title on Amazon or somewhere online, and I would see that it cost anywhere between $200 to $500, I tend to become looking like this guy, right? And then I have to start to identify, okay, how am I going to pay for this? What are ways that I can maybe maneuver without the textbook, or how can I get a reduced cost? It was a lot of logistics and really just a lot of anticipation and stress that I started to recognize I was dealing with almost every semester, and it just didn't make sense to me coming into the later end of my junior year and senior year, where I started to ask the question, like, okay, like if we live in a world where I can stream millions of songs from my phone for a couple dollars a month, why is it still that the academic resources that have been identified for me to be successful in the courses that I'm pursuing are costing me hundreds of dollars, and it's still a struggle and a pain point that I have to deal with every semester. And so that was kind of the first the trail that led to Ecotechs, and for me really asking the question, hey, is there a better solution that we can provide? And it really wasn't until after I graduated where I truly got an appreciation of the magnitude and the scope of this problem, that I was not in the minority, I was actually in the majority of students that struggled to purchase for their textbooks on a semester basis. That it was almost as if we were just expected to save upwards of $1,200 a year in cash, which, when you're 19, 20 years old, that's your savings from your summer job. Those are financial resources that are hard to come by. And of course, when you take a step back and you start to ask students like, hey, if you didn't have to pay for this cost out of pocket, what would you do with it? And a lot of them would say, hey, I would spend it on practical things, my rent, food, maybe even do some more credits, actually go for some more courses. So you see that there's a trade-off here that we're seeing with students. And so as I really started to focus in and learn more about this problem, I noticed a couple different things. Obviously that, not only do students feel this pain point, but also publishers as well. They're starting to recognize that this model of charging hundreds of dollars for a resource is not sustainable long term. And of course, education itself is naturally changing. COVID-19 has really amplified that and showing us that, a classroom is not just a space with four physical walls. It's really just a space of learning. And so students are more on the go. Students are more mobile, and they need to be more dynamic. And a physical textbook in today's world can only go so far, can only provide so much benefit for a student that is on the go. And then of course, untraditional ways of learning has now become traditional, right? And we're seeing an increased amount of students that are doing their classes online and that are maybe focusing more on skill-focused courses or educational pursuits. And so for me, it really spoke to that. How can we start to build solutions and products that really increase the democratization of these resources and materials to make it easier to get your textbook, and so it's not a economical burden or a barrier, making sure that these same resources can be digested in different forms, and of course customizing it so it adapts more nicely to the changes that we're seeing. And with these observations and not only the constraints, but also just the reality of how education is changing, we also know that the digital infrastructure that's supporting that is vastly expanding, right? E-learning, that entire market is due to triple in 3 years. More year after year, more students identify themselves in higher education or continuing learning or adult learning. And then of course, you know, more students are doing their assignments and readings on their mobile devices. And so that means we have to be really advantageous in adopting micro and social learning habits so we can really make the most of this expanding digital networking education. And that's really where ecotechs come into play. And we figured, hey, if we can address the democratization of resources, if we can also make sure that, you know, regardless of what device you use to participate in your education, you can achieve your objectives, making sure that it's not an economical burden, that we can really create more learning moments. And that in this way, we can increase classroom participation, we can increase engagement, and also be more inclusive with different voices. And we can take your static, you know, physical textbook that once was the norm and make it into something that's a lot more dynamic, customized, and of course, tailored to the learning habits of the student and the educator. And, you know, what's really beautiful as well is that we learn we have to make this easy. We have to make the technology really easy. And so we really focused on implementing strategies and adopting habits that people are already familiar with. So we love telling individuals we take the functions of an e-reader and we give it the power of a social network. And so, you know, imagine already, you know, most of you guys are familiar with iBooks and Kindles. And then of course, you know, with the modern day student, they understand how to share, how to tweet those standard social media mechanisms of sharing their thoughts and expressions. And so really combining it and putting it into an academic lens can be very powerful, and we can create a lot more of those learning moments and really put an emphasis on engagement. And, you know, with all this interaction, with all this data, we really also want to make sure that we empower the educator. And so not only, as you see on the screen, do we provide different ways to express your thoughts, so, you know, annotations, bookmarks, highlights, polls, citations, even assessments directly over the margins, we really make it a point to provide that data back to the professor. So in real time, they can identify, hey, what's the engagement look like? And are there opportunities in which I could optimize my curriculum or provide other resources to really adapt to the needs of the student of what I'm observing in real time? And so while it started with costs and affordability, it certainly doesn't end there. And that's really what EcoTax is all about, is creating opportunity through affordability, really tapping into our current educational infrastructure and unlocking the social collaboration that is needed to really take full advantage. So I'll pause it there. I know we have a Q&A later, but that's a quick highlight about EcoTex and really a little bit of the journey and how we understood from firsthand experience, you know, there's an issue here in terms of these out-of-pocket resources, first being an economical barrier, then in the long term can be a hindrance to academic performance if students are not getting their textbooks. And by making it easier, by lowering the barrier and making it more economically affordable, not only can we help students actually get these resources that they need, but in the long term, really encourage more discussion, social collaboration, and participation in a way that we haven't seen before. So once more, my name is Joel Kunku, and now I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Joel. Cut you short. You know, Joel really kicks off a great theme we have that continues with our next speaker, Christina Russell, who is Executive Director of Southern New Hampshire University's Global Education Movement, and that is re-envisioning education. So Joel has talked about how he is trying to make textbook resources more accessible, and Christina is implementing programs that assist refugees in obtaining degrees that will assist them in forwarding themselves and their families. So just to tell you a little bit more about Christina, under her leadership, the global education movement under SNHU has grown from operating in Rwanda to expanding to South Africa, Kenya, Malawi, and Lebanon. In 2017, she was selected as the MIT Solver at Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Marketplace for Social Impact Innovation. So Christina, with that, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And thanks, Joel. That was an awesome presentation. I think the highlight for me, where your work really hit home for me, was thinking about functions of an e-reader and powering it with a social network. So I had really thought about the accessibility piece, but I think I'm taking away lots more in terms of how you're also empowering learners and getting them to be social, also with the access. So it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. Similarly, I'm also going to share my screen and expect some of the usual tech glitches, so please bear with me. I'll have a video because it's more succinct than me. Lisa knows from working with me so far, I can talk about this at length. And can everybody see my screen? I can't see you all while I'm presenting, so let me know, I guess, or maybe Lisa, you can chime in. So just wanted to give at the highest level sort of what the global education movement is doing. So in a nutshell, or when we summarize it in one sentence, it's offering bachelor's degrees by working with proven on-the-ground partners. So it's not just an online learning program. That's a common misconception. It's both in person with partners that operate in our locations, and bringing the SNHU competency-based degree to power that. And we also focus just as much on employment as we do our educational outcomes. So we're tracking both outcomes, and it's at no cost to any of our refugee learners. And the young woman that you can see in the circle photo, her name is Eugenie. And I really wanted to talk about her briefly today because since the theme of this convening today is really around how we make ideas come to life. In many ways, when we started this work in Rwanda and Kigali in 2013, where I had the pleasure of working for Kepler, which is an NGO that partners with SNHU there. So I was with the partner before joining SNHU to sort of grow the impact of the initiative. But we were operating in the capital city, getting great results. And we started asking students in refugee camps to apply to our program as well. And Eugenie and her community of about 17,000 individuals were very, very excited about the prospect of higher education. So in many ways, the idea for bringing the global education movement to not only cities, but also refugee camps and really focusing on refugee learners came from now graduates, then hopeful students like Eugenie, who essentially had graduated from high school, but because they were not citizens of Rwanda, they're most of the folks in this particular camp are from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that means that individuals are not eligible for scholarships, and most are living on a UN ration of roughly 33 cents a day. So even if folks were really, really achieving in secondary school, it was quite difficult to access higher education. And so in terms of today's theme around, making a great idea come to action, I mean, if I've thought that building this program is hard, day in, day out, students teach me that I really don't know what a real problem is. Certainly dealing with insecurity, dealing with policies and governments that can really drastically change life outcomes and trajectories, and just the sweep of a pen has taught me a lot around how to really use tenacity and sticking with things that people really want in the community to move forward. So the idea really came from Eugenie and many of her colleagues who said, you know, there's 7,000 applications for this SNHU scholarship every year in Kigali. What if you came here to our camp? And what if you started here and started showing our young folks that there is a reason to continue to go to school, and that we're not forgotten about and we have lots of potential. And so with that, we approached the IKEA Foundation, who was formerly funding Kepler, the SNHU's partner. So SNHU puts in a lot of money into this, and then our partners also raise money, and we asked them if they would pilot with us starting in a refugee camp. And it's been a really, really adventurous and great partnership with communities and learners. And it's been exciting over the past few years to spread the initiative out to 5 different countries. So I think that the other theme that I really resonated with me about this gathering and hearing Joel's story, and very excited to hear from our next 2 speakers as well, is to think about, you know, what are you good at, and how do you make your business or make your idea run? And so for me, having not grown up in Africa, I mean, I lived there for a few years, but certainly was never going to have the deeply rooted cultural understanding that was needed, had never been a refugee myself, lots of learning in that way, had been a college student myself, but maybe didn't love my own experience. I think I realized from the beginning that partnerships were going to be key. So SNHU was not going to be able to do this alone. I was certainly not going to be able to do it alone. And so partnerships have been a huge piece of the work that we do. And rather than talk about it, I just wanted to show a quick video. Oops, sorry, that's my Slack multiple channels, that really talks about transforming higher education, and also talks about how we partner with folks to make the work come to life. So Lisa, when you really talked about, you know, what's the superpower, I think realizing that SNHU didn't have all the superpowers, and I certainly didn't, and working with partners and building partnerships to make this work has been really essential. So this is just about 3 minutes or so, and we'll watch this to sort of take you to where I'm coming to you from today, which is Cape Town, South Africa, where one of our sites is. You'll get to meet some of our students and grads, but also hopefully get a much better idea of what the partnership looks like between SNHU and local folks as we work to bring bachelor's degrees and pathways to employment.
Universities in the United States are looking at an average of about 60% graduating in 6 years. I don't know any other company that would be allowed to have those kind of outcomes and still charge the kind of money that's being charged. I think there's sort of a trifecta of failure happening for students in higher ed right now based on time, cost, and location. It's kind of come on our timeline, do the courses we tell you to do, instead of saying, how can we put the student at the center of the learning experience? How can we get you to work more on your timeline, your lived reality? The global education movement is a division at Southern New Hampshire University. We bring bachelor's degrees and pathways to employment to refugees, migrants, and other learners that would otherwise not have access to higher education. Students are the drivers of time when they start a project, when they complete a project, and then when we layer in the partnership and the internship component, you've got a degree program that puts the student needs and timeline at the center. At the heart of the success of the model is partnerships and how SNHU engages with a locally based partner in every location where we're operating. Hi, Donata. How are you? Nice to see you. So if you were to visit each one of our locations, you would find a partner who's really the expert in what refugees and migrants might be experiencing on the ground, and helping us guide along the program in a way that really is adaptable to the needs of our students. The benefit of empowering people at different locations is really evident at Scalabrini. If somebody has buy-in and is able to really push ideas forward, they're fully invested in the project, they're going to make it real and come to life. I came in South Africa as a refugee. It was very hard. When I was approached by the Scalabrini Center to become one of the academic coach, I just thought like, wow, this is a chance for me. SNHU has invested a lot in me, so it's my turn to give back to the community. You want everybody in this community to be empowered and become somebody in life. Currently, over 90% of our students are on track to earn their bachelor's degree within 4 years. The model itself has potential for anybody who's not accessing or finding success in higher education. There are a lot of learners that we could serve if we stop focusing on particular groups and more about the power of transforming how higher ed works and thinking about everybody being able to access that model. The graduation days at Kaziba Camp, which happen on the basketball court, and there's thousands of kids totally captivated in that moment, means that the whole community can see themselves differently. That's the transformation of students for themselves, and also that something else is bigger and possible.
Okay, so thanks for watching alongside me with that, and I will just try to get back to the slides to wrap up. So yeah, what I really wanted to emphasize is that, again, this is certainly not an SNHU solo player or leadership solo player. It's really a lot of partners coming together. And the next thing that we're really focusing on in terms of partnerships is really thinking about how do we continue to lower the degree cost so that we can serve more learners. And so to do that, we have started an assessment center in Rwanda, and we work with local talent there, and we're also integrating in some artificial intelligence to try to reduce the degree cost. And so because the degree is competency-based and project-based, projects are assessed rather than papers or final exams. So we're able to use talent in Rwanda, pay the talent a bit roughly 60% higher than average market rate. So it's quite a competitive job and pay people well, but also reduce our assessment costs by about 75% also. So it's a win-win, and we're looking to be able to do more of growing this so that we can rely less on philanthropy, which helped us get things off the ground in the beginning, and more our own business model that will enable us to really push forward and continue to grow this initiative. We're so proud to have expanded to 4 additional countries outside of Rwanda, but at the same time, there are so many learners who are still looking for this that we feel quite a sense of urgency to really figure out the business and financial model. And so we're working on that through the assessment center. And then last, this is our whole team. Just wanted to showcase that because, again, it happens in a myriad of partnerships. It's not just SNHU based employees. We have employees based out of Rwanda, South Africa, Malawi, and many are grads. And so we really look at hopefully this one day being actually all completely grad run, because refugees know their own lives and challenges best and how to solve them best. So we hope you'll continue to see this team grow, and also are really working hard towards both refugee-led partners as well as a refugee fully led program moving forward. That I've probably gone over my 10 minutes, so I will pause and turn it over to our next speaker. And thanks for listening, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Christine. I hope everyone was inspired hearing about, these ideas that individuals have. We're so focused because we're New Hampshire Business Review on just New Hampshire, but obviously all these companies have wide-reaching, are wide-reaching. So let me introduce our next speaker, which is Bill Neer. He is the founder and CEO of Helios, which is a sports technology platform that delivers performance improvement solutions to developing athletes. Just to tell you a little bit more about Helios, Their first product is a membership that includes the Helios Core, a proprietary wearable sensor that uses artificial intelligence to track and benchmark skating performance for hockey players. So, Bill, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and absolutely amazing work, Christina and Joel. It's really amazing to see the impact you're both having with your businesses. Can everyone see my slides here okay, that I've started to present? Lisa, would you be able to just confirm that you can see the first slide here being shared?
Oh, can you hear me? Yes, that we can see the slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So for my talk today, I'm a New Hampshire native and founder at Helios, and my goal was to tell you a bit about how Helios came to be, and it's also quite a bit of a personal journey for me as an entrepreneur. But to start and tell you a bit more about Helios, Helios is a sports technology platform delivering performance improvement solutions to developing athletes. And the key word there is developing athletes. Most solutions today require expensive infrastructure that has made them only accessible to professional sports leagues. So it's not uncommon to see a solution in the TD Garden or Madison Square Garden, but what about the every player? And at Helios, our vision is really to revolutionize skill development for developing athletes and coaches. And we use novel applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning delivered through sensor technology, computer vision, mobile applications to power these solutions. Our first product, as Lisa mentioned, is called the Helios Core. It's a zero infrastructure solution for stride tracking and benchmarking. So this is a device that with just a mobile app and putting it on your shoulder pads, developing hockey players can have a compelling experience around insights into their skating performance, key attributes of speed, agility, balance, explosiveness. In another context of professional sports, this type of solution would typically come with $250,000 of infrastructure that first needs to be installed into the ceiling tiles, something that really doesn't work for the developing market. Our membership is really a combination of delivering the device and a data plan. This is our business model, and it allows Helios members to have a compelling benchmarking experience against an elite community of players. This tool becomes a way for coaches to give individualized touch points and a higher product to the players that they coach. It's a complete digital log of all player performance across games, practices, and skill sessions. And as I mentioned, it's 100% mobile app based with no infrastructure costs. This really allows organizations, coaches, and trainers to provide a level of differentiation in a competitive market. I'm fortunate today to be joined by a team of talented software developers, designers, mechanical designers, statisticians. It wasn't that long ago that this slide was just me, and I was, looking for ways to make me and my face take up a whole slide, where today it's a little bit less of a problem. We also are very fortunate to have a number of early believers that have invested in the company and our vision. Like special thanks to EJ Ponto and the team at Lear Capital, which is actually a New Hampshire-based investment firm that made an early decision to back Helios when we were, more at the idea stage, and it was probably more of a decision to back, the founding team rather than, a business that was close to the marketplace. So for me, when I think about the why, this is all about creating the solutions that I wish I had as a developing player that are still inaccessible to developing athletes. As an entrepreneur, the why for me has always been about creating an opportunity for impact. So how can I have nonlinear impact on the world around me through technology that I can develop? It's also about creating lifestyle freedom for me and my family. And I think entrepreneurship is really this interesting vehicle for personal growth. If you really want to accelerate who you are personally and professionally, there's nothing like the level of growth that entrepreneurship can expose you to. When I think about my journey into entrepreneurship, I sort of view it as 33 years of training to this point that I'm at right now. Grew up in New Hampshire, had the opportunity to attend public high school before going to MIT, and have been working for technology companies or technology startups ever since. Pretty visual guy, so to take you through a couple of the stages there. Growing up in Moulton Borough, attended Moulton Borough Academy, it wasn't exactly the place where I could study the most, engineering centric courses. See here, there was a lot of Latin at the heart of what we did. We were fortunate to start a Moulton Borough and Interlakes hockey team, which was really a key passion for me. But going to MIT, it really opened up a critical doorway to technology, engineering, and how products are designed and developed. Got to continue playing hockey and captain the team there. And there's a really interesting, I guess, aspect to how Helios was founded connected to the MIT hockey story. Here on the bottom right, it looks like quite a celebratory moment when we won a championship. But actually, at the end of my junior year, heading into my senior year as the nominated captain of the program, MIT was forced to cut 8 varsity athletic programs from the budget following the 2008 financial crisis. And so there I am sitting in the stands on this day as the administrator delivered the tough news. And ultimately, with the program and the responsibility of the team in my hands heading into my senior year, I was faced with a pretty difficult, challenge, which was I really going to let down a 105-year-old tradition, or were we going to find a way to save the program? And so we got to work, and we were fortunate to build a group of loyal hockey alumni from different decades. We established a 501c3 and we began fundraising to ensure the continuity of the program in the coming season. We had some really interesting events. We did a alumni game with the Boston Bruins. We did an alumni game with the Israeli national hockey team, which I didn't even know existed up until this point. We actually had to hire a new head coach, and that ended up becoming Helios's second investor and becoming a really great gateway to a lot of interesting NHL contacts and support systems that Helios has today. As I mentioned, we won a championship, and I'm proud to say that one of the results of this effort was we were able to raise enough money to basically open an endowment account to fund the program in perpetuity. During grad school, I had my first adventure into entrepreneurship with a medical device company concept called Thrombotics. We were looking to use a muscle stimulation technology basically to prevent a blood clot. It was a pretty big fish for a first-time entrepreneurial team, founding team to go after. And ultimately, we decided, given challenges in the IP landscape, that this wouldn't be something that we wanted to spend 5 years working on. And I think for any entrepreneur that's really looking at opportunities, no matter how far down the road you are, I think it's a really interesting kind of piece of advice to be able to look at what you're doing and decide, is this what I want to spend the next 5 to 10 years working on, and what's the likelihood of success? And being able to step back and reflect on those decisions and decide how you want to use that most valuable asset you have in life, which is your time, I think is a really valuable skill. I went on to spend 5 years working at a really exciting active suspension startup called Clear Motion. We were 20 people when I joined and around 200 when I left. And as you can see on the bottom left here, we were developing some really powerful technology that could make cars do some pretty amazing things. In 2018, my wife and I both actually stepped away from our full-time jobs to start businesses. My wife, Taylor, started a business in the design of wedding invitations and products, and has been incredibly successful at scaling her business over the last 3 years. And as you can see here in the top left, these were the humble beginnings of developing electronics and software behind the first Helios products on a butcher block in our apartment here in Portsmouth. More recently, on the bottom right, this was the beta that we started with our first customer in the middle of COVID last November. And I thought I'd share just a few lessons with you today on what I've learned through this journey of entrepreneurship. I think the first one is, as a founder, your first job is to do the first things right. You're really laying a foundation, and many things will ripple from the decisions you make in the earliest days of structuring your business, the people you choose to work with, the patents you file. Some of these things are long-term investments in the business, and there's a lot of short-term things that need to get done, but it's really important that you put the time into doing things thoughtfully the first time and doing them right. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement. It's easy to kind of do the same thing or get stuck doing the same thing for weeks and weeks and weeks. But if you set the goal to just be even 0.5% or 1% better every single day, you'll find that that really scales. And especially when you bring other team members into the equation, this is a really powerful concept. Time management is, one of the most challenging things in being a founder. You quickly realize that, there could be 4 of you, and being really intentional with your time and understanding how the decisions you make with your time translate to success for the business. I think it's a key skill for any early stage founder. Adapt to your environment. I think COVID, if nothing else, has taught us that the world can get shooken up pretty quickly. And a couple of things that we were really proud about was, when we couldn't access hockey rinks and ice time was $300 an hour, we found a way basically to do development of our NextGen skating technology, at a outdoor hockey rink here, familiar Puddle Duck Pond rink in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And it was an interesting juxtaposition, when we'd be out there doing this NextGen work amongst the oldest homes in Portsmouth. But to give you an idea, like it would take us, I think it was $7 to be able to get out on this ice. So the contrast and sort of finding a solution given the environment, given the conditions, it's always important. And as I mentioned, we were super, glad to, amidst the pandemic, to have gotten started, with our beta program with our first customer. And we've spent the last 5 months really making rapid growth on the business that, had we waited for COVID to be over, it would have been a major delay for the business. I'd say the last point is just that you are not a lottery ticket. I like to think that I'm the sum of a number of the experiences that I've shared with you today. You can wake up in the morning and think of all the things that are challenging about building or scaling an idea into a successful business. But, I think it's also powerful to sort of think about backing you as the individual with a sum of experiences that allow you to be here doing what you're doing. And I think that that's, a confidence inspiring, reassuring way to think about all the things that can be really scary in building a new business. A few startup resources I just wanted to shout out to. We've been incredibly fortunate to get support from the Seacoast SCORE office. I know Steve Goldberg and Steve Hirschfield have joined us today. Special thanks to them. We were part of Josh Sears' Alpha Loft Accelerate New Hampshire program, went through Mass Challenge, and we also get some really great mentorship from MIT Venture Mentoring Service. There's a lot out there, and I really encourage anyone looking to start a business or scale an idea to evaluate these resources. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and feel free to connect. I'd love to take any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Bill. Just very cool how you took a personal passion of yours and, made it a business idea. I do want to remind our listeners to submit questions, because after Carla speaks, we will be having a panel Q&A, and I have a number of questions to ask our speakers. But if there's anything you'd like to ask, please actually, I guess if you could put it in the chat, because it looks like, maybe I can go to the Q&A tab. I wasn't sure if I could access that because, technical difficulties. But if you could put it in either the chat or Q&A, I will look at both of those options. And let me next introduce our last speaker, which is Carla Vanderhoof. She is co-founder and chief design officer of Adaptation, which is a platform that allows users to quickly build apps on top of existing databases, such as Salesforce.com, MS Dynamics, MongoDB, and others. And what's interesting with Adaptation is it can be utilized by enterprise teams as well as citizen developers who are trying to take their ideas from the prototype stage to market. So Carla, I'll let you explain a little bit more about how you guys founded Adaptation.
All right, can you all hear me? Okay, good. My computer has some challenges, so if I go out of the screen, I'll just try to get back to you. But thank you for the introduction, and I love hearing from all of the founders today, and I definitely am feeling inspired by hearing all of the founder journeys and your startup journeys as well. I think I'd like to start. I'm going to pull up my deck, but that has been giving me some trouble too, so bear with me. Okay. All right, I believe I'm sharing. So unless you tell me otherwise, I will just continue on. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, how to design your idea for scale. I partnered with my husband, so I'm a co-founder, husband and wife team, and we got our start really organically. We had sort of a consulting firm as a gig, and what we realized is we were helping people with their CRMs, and they were very difficult, and we were building custom applications on top of them to make the usability easier. I'm the design background, so we kept getting more and more and more asks and requests and things getting pulled out of us until we realized, hey, this is a major problem. And we decided to take the leap and start our startup. So a little about me, I'm the design half of our organization of adaptation, and I've focused really mainly on the usability and the front end. And what we decided to do was build a platform that basically could replace myself and replace my co-founder, who has sort of the business logic side, to make it easier for people to build solutions that were meaningful to them, easier, simple. There's no reason we felt like enterprise software should be so complicated that you have to have hours and days and weeks of training to just be able to know how to do your job. So we started off knowing that we had a big idea, having a big product journey, because platforms are not just, one simple problem that we're solving or a tool to solve a problem. It's more of like the ability to build tools to solve problems. So when we were starting the business idea, we knew our first goal was going to have to be to build a good business, because if you don't build a good business, then you're never going to be able to scale that business. So I think we learned a lot from everybody else's presentations. Like, you have to start with the pain, and the pain has to be real. The market needs to be big enough, and people want to or need to want your solution. And then, of course, there's that differentiation, which Bill just mentioned about IP, right? Sometimes it's really hard if you enter a competitive space to really figure out your differentiation. And then the last piece, which to me is the scale factor, is understanding that at some point you're going to need to have a competitive moat for your company. So to me, one of those best competitive moats is the network effect. And because we're a platform, we have the opportunity to have those partners, have external builders all contributing. And really, you get to become an idea center, an innovation center of shared thoughts and shared solutions within a space. And that's really unique for especially the Salesforce space, where they have their primary marketplace, but there's really no secondary market where you can share solutions. So, okay. So I just want to start too by alignment about what is scale. So for us, scale is the ability to grow your company without really hitting those restrictions. And this is challenging because when you're a startup, you can't always have those components of scale right away. It's more about understanding what you're going to need to do and planning for it ahead. We've talked a lot about kind of getting your ideas, bringing your ideas to life today. And I did want to share this resource for anyone out there that's thinking about starting a business or thinking about starting a startup. So this is the David Scott's 9 Steps to Repeatable, Scalable, and Profitable Growth. And we love this model. I think of it as the startup life cycle. And one of the things that I want to mention is, I think when founders start their startup, there's this kind of opinion that you're going to have a pain, have the solution, you're going to go to market and get those users and then instantly start to scale. And that's just not, that's not reality always. So in this model, make it scalable doesn't even happen until sort of the center of your startup journey. And there's so much to figure out prior to that. And that's kind of where at Adaptation we've been living. You have to start with your hypothesis. You have to start by ideation and speaking to users and understanding the value of your product. You have to prove it can be sold and that people other than founders can sell it. So I think this is a great resource for anyone who is thinking about founding a startup or wanting to double check where you're at in the life cycle. This is a great resource for us. So really those three components of scale that we looked at from day one was, hey, do we have a repeatable idea? And can we create a repeatable product? Can we create repeatable processes? The second, and these aren't in any specific order, you don't have to solve any of these problems like first or last, but second is the technology piece. And are you going to build your technology to support mass adoption? So say you launch on Product Hunt and you get 2,000 people who sign up in a day. You have to be aware that your infrastructure may or may not be able to take that bandwidth. So technology is a big piece of scalability when you have an idea that you want, a big idea that you kind of have to think about. And then finally, probably the one that I love the most is audience. So are you creating something that's going to have an impact in your space? And is that audience going to be receptive? So will they be willing to jump on board and self-service? Is there a hook to your product? Can you build that community really to have that network effect? And I love all the talk of the partners and partnerships that other companies and organizations have kind of had today, because that's such an essential piece of not just having a good business, but also having a scalable one. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted scale. Because for us, we had our go-to-market channels, we had our customers were pulling our ideas out of us, and we were building in a direction, and then all of a sudden the world changes. So how do you handle and navigate those? I am of the mind that the pandemic has changed our world forever. And going forward, we're going to have a digital first audience. So when you go to create your idea, you have to consider the digital world as your first option to, get your product and marketing growth strategy. Having that self-service, we call it an MLP instead of MVP because we love minimal lovable product. And really that's saying like, are people getting hooked and do they have the value right away? And the focus on flawless onboarding. So if you're a software company, that's really the focus. And that's where we've been focusing a lot on adaptation, because now the digital world is your storefront. And people don't have the tolerance or the patience like they do in person. If you can go to a conference, you can tell stories. In the digital world, you have to tell them instantly. So at Adaptation, part of our journey to get our idea to the world has shifted, because we were so, B2B enterprise software, we're in person, we're going to conferences and hitting the floors. And now it's a new world for like, how do you grab people's attention and tell them what you have is so important? And that means that you have to focus on your user experience. Of course, yes, I am the design side, so I could do a whole hour on just user experience here. But the three things that I've found most valuable in the realm of user experience, because it's such a big world, is it findable, is it usable, and is it valuable? So at Adaptation, we've worked a lot thinking about, hey, how do we prove our value quickly? How do we make sure things that we're putting out there are instantly usable and pass sort of what we call like a grunt test of like, oh yeah, I push this button, I get it. And lastly, is it findable? Shifting and being aware of how the world can change, you have to build that adaptability and have more than one channel and more than one go-to-market channel when you get ready to get your market and your product into market. So in summary, there are many wonderful business models. And I think no matter what you choose, you need to think about, like, how do I have a good business first? And that's what we talked a lot about that in our early days. It's like, we want to have a big impact, we have a big business, but ultimately, how do we make it valuable? And because we had customers, we're so fortunate. We had revenue right away. So that, because we focused on, customer success and having a good business and setting sort of the foundation and the scaffolding up to be able to grow. And then secondly, you can have a growing business that isn't necessarily scalable, but if you do want sort of to hit that scale moment, you need to be planning for that. So, and then if you are aiming for scale, just keep in mind repeatability being important, your audience and the technology, all of those things need to be able to support that scaling motion. Doesn't always have to happen right away. Remember where you are in the startup life cycle. And if you do choose to scale, there's that competitive moat that you're going to want to think about and how that will fit into the digital world. So I'll pause there. Here, let me get back to you all. And I'm really excited to hear about Q&A. I could honestly talk forever about, like how we set up our business model and how we got our idea out into the market more, and how our customers were kind of pulling everything out of us. And then there's that balance of like, okay, we want to do everything for our customers, but we also have big goals and big dreams. So, there's a balancing act there. But I'll let you guys get to Q&A.
Yeah, if everyone could come up onto the screen, and I think we have a lot to talk about here. So I will wait for a few more people to join us. Thank you for your presentation, Carla. That was great, especially as Carla and I have talked about, the user experience side is so important. I know I've used databases, for instance. We use the database Data Joe. And I've now become familiar with it, but I will say the rest of my team doesn't really know how to use it because it is not exactly user-friendly. So that matters a lot. Well, thank you for joining us on the screen. So I actually thought I'd get started first with one of my questions, which is, in the process, when you come up with your idea, how did you, was there a sticking point when you were figuring out, okay, I have this idea, but now I have to get to the next step where either I have a platform, an actual platform to show this is the starting point of my idea, or at what point did it become that inspiration to more of a physical or digital product that you could then build off of? And was there any sticking points in getting to that process? Or was it, with Carla, for instance, and her husband, they already had a consulting business. I don't know if that was easier then to create your product because you kind of had some of the tools there to build that platform. So I don't know if someone wants to just speak up, or if we just start with a hand process because of the delay. Carla?
I can go first. And I would say that it was both good and challenging to have dedicated customers that love what you do, because sometimes your goals and vision are aligned and other times they're not. So sometimes the customers want, we started off as consultants, and to bridge that gap from consultants to actually having a product is really challenging. And sometimes the customers that you start off with might not want to do anything themselves. They may love the fact that you white glove things. So that has had its trade-offs. The benefit is that we did have funding, and we've been, we were bootstrapped for a long time up until our first funding round last year. But it's kind of one of those things that you have to weave into your product roadmap, because you have the features that your customers need, but also the vision, and you have to kind of create those milestones to be like, okay, but this is where we're going, and we don't want to lose track of that. So it can be hard.
Well, and Joel, I wonder, for instance, with creating EcoText, and I know too that you were a UNH student, and it sounded like you had collaborated with others from the UNH ecosystem. Explain to me a little bit that process of, okay, I have an idea, and now I'm creating this actual platform that your platform does so many different things.
Yeah, I would say it's really quite a journey. So as I mentioned earlier, I was an engineer by academia. So I didn't really have any business knowledge, or, I didn't really have any kind of guidance in terms of this is how you go about building a business. And so I really leveraged the tools on campus, like the eCenter, for example, and as Bill mentioned in his presentation, accelerated program, just to dive deep. And I pulled my team members alongside with me. We kind of went through that journey together. And so that was really my learning process, was just being around others who has done before, around others that are also in my position. And when it came to a point where, I was just getting 5 times more the workload than I could get myself. And I'm like, okay, it's time to switch full time. It's time to actually go into the next gear and make this venture a reality.
So let's see, I have some questions here. Mark Whitney asked, what are the biggest challenges each of you are facing now in your next phase of growth? Curious who would like to answer that. Or I know Christina has a lot of, big endeavors ahead of her as they work to switch from philanthropic funding to a more sustainable model.
Yeah, Lisa, happy to jump in on that. So I think as I started to get into at the end of the presentation, we are super grateful to all the philanthropists who have made this work possible, including SNHU, who's a donor, both in covering all the indirect costs like legal and IT and all that, but also putting actual cash into the project as well. And then we've been able to do a lot of fundraising. But I think what we've recognized is that, number one, that takes a lot of time from the team and from the leader. And number two, you, as anybody, if I'm investing my own money, I expect to have some say in what happens with those funds. And so I think what we've come up against now is that there's a tension, as there should be with any investor, around what happens with your strategy when you've got investors. So I think our big challenge is starting to look at how we can, even though this is a social entrepreneurship project and serving learners in need, and lots of funders have been interested, how can we really take control of our strategy through developing out the financial backbone through our assessment center business in Rwanda. So we've been able to start to secure some outside contracts, creating curriculum. We're doing IT services for the American Association of Social Workers. We've done assessment for the city of Chicago. So I think, similar to what Bill said, you kind of start with one thing, but it's about continuous improvement moving forward. And so we realized we were thinking way too small with it just being about assessment for our own students, and that we can actually grow a business behind that. I mean, the challenges behind that are many. We have different time zones. We have implicit bias in what people think that folks might be capable of in different countries, or people who grew up differently than themselves. So lots to take on with that challenge, but I think also really exciting in terms of thinking about philanthropic support for pilots and new ideas, but really being able to drive our own strategy through the creation of this assessment center business. Pause there.
Awesome. Yeah, and Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one of the biggest challenges that we're actually facing is, how do you start and scale a production supply chain, coming off of the tail of the pandemic, with a physical product that kind of leads the membership model that we have as a business model. We've had to be really intentional on de-risking challenges in the global supply world. So, we use semiconductor components that you're seeing on the news are shutting down production automotive plants because they can't get the parts, right? So we've been super intentional in, like, how do you actually, as an early stage startup, you also don't want to carry inventory of parts on your balance sheet. It's a liability, right? So it's being super intentional with, like, having a very detailed plan for how to de-risk all these things. One of the other things we've done is actually set up our production up until we hit, tens of thousands of units in New Hampshire, which is a really valuable opportunity to keep things like within an hour drive. Unfortunately, flying to most traditional, manufacturing locations that we might have evaluated in a non-COVID world is just not possible now. But it's also, sort of something that we can be proud of, that the product's being made in America, in New Hampshire, as we get started here.
Go ahead, Carla.
Well, I love that, Bill, because I've been thinking a lot about how people with physical products have been dealing with kind of those limitations around workforce and getting the supplies that you need. On the digital side, everybody was forced overnight to go that way. So I think one of our large challenges is the fact that now there is so much noise. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel this in your LinkedIn inboxes, but or emails. How do these people get my information? But people are reaching out to me constantly, and it's exhausting. So how do you share your value and reach your audience in a non-obnoxious way? Right? Because and for us especially, our brand is very important to us, and we always want to be helpful and we want to provide value first. So it feels so wrong to just like badger people, like, look at us. So to me, that's been like an oversaturated digital world that's just exhausting people. How do you stay unique? How do you, like share your ideas when people are so overwhelmed?
That's a good point. I mean, I do see it, obviously, working for a newspaper. My inbox is always flooded as well. But I do have to ask a question from Josh Sear, which is, what can we do in New Hampshire at any level to rethink how we support entrepreneurship and innovation? And I'm curious because, Bill had mentioned the acceleration program. I mean, what do you guys think with starting your company? Were you looking for any of these sort of resources as you developed or grew your companies? Go ahead, Carla.
I can literally talk forever. So if you say stop, then just
I'll let you know.
So I, like Bill, have a lot of those resource logos. We went through New Hampshire Tech Alliance back when it was Alpha Loft. Joshua Sear is an amazing connector and such a great support of startups. We went through the Mass Challenge back in 2018, another great mentor network and just like huge resource center. I would say New Hampshire does the ideation phase really well. And they help you understand how to get started. Where I think New Hampshire could help is really when founders are ready to raise money. That's not always an easy task to do in New Hampshire or even in New England. And that's where we've hit a lot of barriers, because what we're finding is that the expectations for the kind of even just the whole New England is they want you to be further ahead than like, okay, we're seed, we're here, we're not here. They want more proof. And they want more revenue than maybe in some other fundraising locations. So that has been, I think, an area that New Hampshire specifically and New England could work on to really keep the founders building here.
Well, and Bill and Christina, oh no, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, kind of piggybacking on what Carla said there, bringing a lot of the execution, kind of the legacy entrepreneurs in New Hampshire and bringing them closer to academia, because I mean, there's so many great ideas, right? I get asked to be part of pitch competitions, and there are dozens of pitch competitions throughout the state, money being thrown around for, teenagers that have, unique, simple ideas. And of course, with the internet, they have the tools to get some level of traction and to actually put it out there in the world. And I think where it comes to is that scalability aspect and really putting really core business integrity behind those ideas. So I think really like that mentorship aspect, if you want to become a professional athlete, one of the best things you can do is go get a coach, right? So I think really having a marketplace where we can really build more of those relationships, I think is going to be key.
And I want to ask, I listed Bill and Christina specifically because I know venture capitalists, you had received funding from them, and I'm not sure if everyone has also received that sort of funding, or if you could talk a little bit about. It's interesting because I've heard generally with venture capitalists, sometimes it's hard to get their attention to New Hampshire. Though Bill noted there's one company, I had written it down, Lear Capital, that is based out of New Hampshire. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how it is trying to get that sort of funding. And with Christina, she has gotten philanthropic funds, but then it sounds like there might also be a blurred line there, but with some venture capitalists getting into supporting more, philanthropic ideas.
Yeah, I would say raising money in the early days, it's definitely a bit of a numbers game. I mean, you put a lot of time into like establishing relationships, and I think it's all about kind of a belief system. If like the underlying thesis of your company and then like the people behind it rings true to like the person you're talking to, and they have the ability to back it, sometimes you don't have to be all the way down the road, in terms of being in the marketplace, having 100 customers in order to get support. But I think it is one of the hardest things. And for us, it's been a very incremental process. We've been backed, mostly by angel investors and individuals who have some strong, purposeful connection, to the first sport that we're starting in, being ice hockey. And I think it's also really interesting that like from some of our earliest investors, one of the things they said to us is this is ultimately an investment in you, Bill, and this early team. Even if you pivot this company into something different, which is like a highly likely thing for a startup to end up doing, we're really investing in you, your background, and your ability to do that. And I think that that's an important point for anyone starting a company to realize, that it's as much about the founder and their ability to find a path to a successful business, through the learnings of the early stage, as it is about the thing that's maybe on paper on the slides at that first day that you're presenting to that investor.
Yeah, I think just to build on that and also to tap into your great question. I feel like as getting both philanthropic funds and also working with some venture capitalists that are sort of dabbling in this space. So I think as inequity in our society grows, there's this big philanthropy field that's growing. So it's $10 million grants and higher. And that's at least where some of our funding is coming from. And we're seeing big foundations that traditionally operate on their own come together with, the founders of Airbnb. Most of ours have been more Silicon Valley based. So definitely getting to know folks more in the neighborhood, to the point made earlier. But I think in terms of supporting, I think in terms of like running in these circles, or to Bill's point, getting people to invest in you at the beginning, which is usually about your leadership. There's a lot of troubling data around how people like to fund people who look like themselves, and venture capitalists tend to look and be a certain way. So I feel like I've been at this interesting intersection of both privilege and oppression within this. And so there's, I can see lots of ways that like whiteness works for fundraising, and then lots of ways where the data seems to really ring true that women are questioned 3 times the amount of men when they are in front of investors, or are perceived to not have quote unquote business savvy or not communicate that way. So I feel like, Josh, it would be really, really cool to think about how are we helping raise the voice and get people comfortable in circles where they might not feel comfortable. And I feel that a lot. Like you can feel when somebody starts to put the heat on you because they just don't maybe think you belong in that circle, or maybe you just think they're thinking that and it's not actually real. But I think to support folks, would echo everything around the actual raising of money, but then also let's look at who's raising money, who's not, and figure out how we can double down on the groups that aren't having as much access or success, because we're missing out on all of those great ideas and businesses simply because of how society works. So I feel like some incubators, and you're probably already doing them, focused on whether it's imposter syndrome or I'm not a part of this circle, and getting people to break through that would be beneficial both for investors as well as those of us who are looking for investments as well.
Pausing before I go on to the next question. So I have an audience member who wants to ask, let's see, if you could describe qualities you look for either before the pandemic or how they might have changed since the pandemic, and looking at employees and building your team. And I also want to build off of that question. I know we can maybe a separate question for Christina regarding partnerships, because I know she has a lot to say regarding how you work with partners and how that influences her work at SNHU. So for instance, Joel, coming out of the UNH system, are there members from UNH that are part of your team? Were they part of developing the platform? And like, how do you find too that talent and just to build, what one of our audience members had asked regarding what qualities do you look for when you're like, okay, I want to build a product, I need a team to help me do this?
Yeah, I think for me, and it's really driven by how long of a relationship I have with an individual and what I believe their strongest qualities are. So a lot of the team members currently on my team I've known for several years, or at the worst case scenario, have been a mutual friend, for several years in some shape or form. And so when I look at how they operate, how they behave, they have a really strong quality. And then my brain kind of thinks about, okay, what if we applied that trait into this mechanism within Ecotex or in this business operation, or whatever the case might be, and say, hey, let's just take your particular strong suit and propel it in a way that makes business sense, right? And so really what I look for is the passion. Is this something that you could do without getting paid? Is this something that really excites you? And if that is aligned, and to me, that seems like the perfect equation for at least, founding a team member, and then we can really excel in that way. So it's really about relationships for me. I want to build solutions and make impact with people that I like, and people that share the same vision with me. So I think that's the number one driver. And then everything else we can teach, we can learn ourselves, and we can figure out in some capacity. But I think that alignment at the core has to be there.
And I know Joel, oh, well, let me first ask Joel actually a question, then we'll go to you, Carla. So Joel mentioned that at first it was just you, and of course now you've built out your team. Tell me a little bit about, that process of adding more people onto your team, and was it really looking for their that technical experience to implement this idea, or what did you have to go through in order to make sure you had a solid team, which, as you mentioned too, with investors, that's what they're looking at too, right? Is, do you have a solid team?
Yeah, so I did put a technical lens, but it wasn't too crazy, right? Because I was in college, and what's the most I can expect from a 20, 21, 22-year-old like myself, right? And so, for example, one of the earliest team members, Nelson Thomas, who's a CMO currently, he was really big in philanthropy. He was doing communications, and he was always at events, kind of preaching the different events that he was running, and he was really effective there. And I'm like, that could be really powerful in marketing, right? And so I brought him on board with that kind of sentiment, and we did steps to really make sure we had mentors, or we invited upper marketing professionals within our network. And so when I pitched to investors, I'm like, hey, this is an individual that I've known for years. They have the integrity that we need to succeed. They have kind of the passion and the grit. Being a student athlete, they understand that it's not supposed to crack under pressure. And we're showing a willingness to learn, right? The upside potential is there. And so that's really how I pitch the team to investors, knowing that, hey, we might be a group of 22-year-olds, but we're really here for the long term, and really trying to make an impact that's disruptive.
And Bill, similar experience, right, in terms of building your team and kind of showing that getting investment based on your core team working together.
Yeah, it's a super powerful day when you go from like the only person on your team slide to having even just a single other person. I mean, when you're an early stage founder, you wake up every day, hopefully early, and the business moves forward because of the actions you take that day, right? And it becomes a really powerful moment when even there's like one other person on this planet that's waking up and making the vision a reality. It starts to become really empowering. And so once you start to have a small team around you, it's de-risking, it's also empowering, it's motivating, it's really exciting just to see that the progress is being made at the hands of multiple people. We look for, team members who are results driven. I think kind of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, that's been constant for us. I think it's really important post-pandemic because this work from home thing is super powerful, but it does require like a lot of trust, right? Trust that, when you have an employment contract and someone is taking the time and the freedom that you're providing in more of a like remote first working culture, that the results will come. But for me, that's always been the most important thing, is to like build a team of people that we trust, that have a shared passion, like like Joel said, for the company, for the purpose. And at the end of the day, like they're working hard to help us realize that future that we envision.
Go ahead, Carla.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on what both Joel and Bill said there. And I'll preface it by saying your team is definitely everything. Like your business is going to be made or broken by the people that you have around you building building your vision, right? So we look at three things. One is culture adds, expertise, and output, to Bill's point there, as results driven. And this is one thing I want to say the pandemic has really reinforced, because we are here on out, we will be a remote culture first. So our reach to get culture adds and diversity is much further now. So we have people all throughout our country with different backgrounds and, different ideals and ways of thinking and approaching things that we never had before. And that's been really valuable for adaptation as a whole. We also have a bigger reach to expertise, because, you might have a smaller pool if you're just looking around your 30-mile radius. Then like, hey, if I can look at the whole world and we're trying to build enterprise software, like who really has this knowledge? Can we go poach them, or can we go convince them to come here with us? And that's been tremendously valuable. So that, and then output. So it's like you can tell what people are doing because you meet with them every day. And then if you see on the other side of that, those things are aligned and done, it's like, awesome. This person can stand this up. They know what they're doing because you're seeing it. Whereas sometimes I think that gets masked in the office setting, because I don't know, I feel like if you're talking a lot to people, you're getting something different out of them, not necessarily that actual thing. So those are the three things that we really focus on when we're building our team at adaptation. And it's one thing that I say the pandemic benefited, because it helped us kind of wake up to some of that.
Well, and I want to say, Christina works with partners all over the world. So she obviously realizes how talent is everywhere. Tell me a little bit, Christina, about, I know we've spoken about with your partners, you have to be careful about what looks good on paper. That's not really the partners you choose. You try to find partners that really align with your ideas and the implementation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Happy to, Lisa. So, for our funders and of course for university administration, all that, we do have this lovely spreadsheet, and it includes everything like job prospects at the end, and GDP and security indexes and all these lovely numbers that pop up at the end. But we have, as you and I chatted about, we have found those numbers to be informative, but not necessarily how we would choose a partner. That in the end, it's how do you work together? Are your ideals aligned? So we've walked away from partners that maybe can bring some more financial resources to the table, or are longer established, for example, that on paper might really look like the best partner. But it's really when we sit down to have the conversation around what's the vision of the work, what are we trying to accomplish together, and also understanding how does the partner treat beneficiaries that it's working with now. So here in South Africa, we had done all this analysis, and we were looking at 10 different possible partners. I remember we were walking into the Scalabrini Center of Cape Town, which is the location where we operate that you were able to see in the video. And I was walking behind 5 women. It was my first time getting to the center. I was kind of lost. And watching the way that they walked into the center, like they were home, like they owned the space. There was nobody saying, hey, sign in. What are you doing here? What's happening? It felt like that was the kind of dignified treatment and like home treatment and partnership treatment that we wanted, that would probably outweigh any of our, 80th percentile numeric score. So we do both, but I think it does come down to making sure that we forego other things in our budget so that we can come meet the prospective partners, get to know them, and have that conversation together to make sure that we're really prioritizing the learner above all else. So a bit of numbers, and then for the numbers folks, I think I'm quite squeamish actually around this, but we try to marry the both, that there is a sort of qualitative and how are you working with folks and seeing that work to making the ultimate decision of who we're partnering with.
And I have a very specific question for Joel. So I have an audience member who's out with textbook writing. Math and science, they're saying it's a pretty small market and it's also a very time consuming process. So they're just wondering, does your system assist with the writing of textbooks? Is there, how is the author remuneration affected in your model? I'm just curious if that ties into your business or if that's kind of more an aside.
For sure. So there's a lot of different strategies, and our approach really depends on the goal of the customer or the professor, right? So we do have partners that work directly alongside with educators. So if they want to redesign the entire course to make it fit around a particular digital textbook, those resources exist. We also help in uploading your own materials or stitching them together in a way that makes sense, or bringing it to life, adding more kind of engaging tools. And then of course, with some strategies we can accomplish this by not just having the core textbook, but also in these STEM fields, incorporating those publications, those journals, more of those kind of modern resources. So there's a lot of different ways, and offers is always at the center of it, whether it's the professor who's offering it or a researcher or a traditional offer. But that consequence and impact all really depends with the goal. And our job is really to identify the most effective or efficient strategy to get the educator there, because time is of essence, and we really want to make any migration, if it's perceived as that, as fast as possible.
And Joel, so another question for you. I remember when we spoke prior to this event, we talked about how you can come up with an idea, and your idea obviously is to make textbooks, information, and resources more available to students from all sorts of economic backgrounds. But when you're selling your model to a university, you had to also kind of rethink the value of your product, because you can have a very you can have one idea of looking at how your business, the meaning of it to you, but then you got to see it. How does your customer see the value in it? Can you explain how you also kind of rephrased how your company provides value to colleges?
Definitely. First thing, as a student, when you're got your syllabus and you got these resources, you're typically asked to follow the lead of the professor, right? And so it's seen as an expense to the student, and in some cases that can be really dramatized to a barrier if it's too much. And so on the flip side with the university, we need to really demonstrate how it's an investment for them, that if you meet the student halfway, if you're able to unlock some of those economical barriers, the student can achieve more, right? They're less likely to transfer out of their major because of these out-of-pocket costs, or they're less likely to drop out. We see a lot of retention rates being linked to economical struggles. They're more likely to actually go for more credits because they're going further in the classroom, and they're less likely to go behind, because in some cases you have to wait for that financial aid package, or you have to wait for the book to be shipped, or they go through this decision-making paralysis, and that puts them 2-3 weeks back. And once you get to 3 weeks back in the beginning of the semester, it's like you're always playing catch up. And so we're really, when we're trying to work with universities, to see this as an investment and say, hey, sure, this could be increase in kind of the balance sheet up front, but look at the benefits you're providing to students. And when you kind of recognize it or realize it in the long term, that's really growth in admissions. That's really growth in diversity. And hopefully those experiences come back to growth in donations, which I think everyone likes to hear as well.
Awesome. And I'm wondering too, I think that's our final question. We're about to wrap up, but is there ways in which you had to pivot and rethink how you did your business or how you sold it to your customers and helping them find the value in your product? Sure, Carla.
Yeah, I mean, ours was, I want to say, definitely our go-to-market was fairly dramatic because the enterprise B2B world is very in-person. You build trust by looking at someone and having a conversation about how you can solve their business problems. And a lot of the people that would kind of bring you in are, to some degree, risking, they're taking a risk on you. So when you're able to meet those people in person, that trust is built, much stronger than, your opportunity in the digital space. So for us, it was very much like our main channel kind of vanished overnight. So it's like, well, how do you build trust then in that digital space? And really that involves self-service, and the proof is in the pudding of your product, right? So if people get in there and they can build something, then they have that trust. So it was like not the easiest year, when you have your structure set up to go in one direction and you already have product market fit there, you already have validation, you know what you're doing, and then to be kind of shaken up as much as this year has shaken up our world. You have to focus on user experience. You have to focus on messaging. You have to focus on getting people that value and the trust based on the experience you provide.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to all of our speakers. It was really great to hear more about your companies and your ideas and how you guys are just, you're getting results. So I appreciate your time. And I want to thank also our sponsors. We have our event sponsor, Connection, We Solve IT, United Healthcare, Tufts Health Freedom, and BankProv. So thank you everyone for attending NextGen. Please stay tuned to nhbr.com/events for more of our lineup this fall, because we will be having in-person events, but we will also have the opportunity to stream if you prefer to watch them from home. So have a nice day, everyone, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.